Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're going to take a quick look here at specific coins here that are performing better and worse than Bitcoin, as well as understanding a little bit more about Bitcoin's manipulative Power 3 trade setup, and also some CME futures that are relevant to be aware of too, because CME gaps are a very relevant thing, especially when you gap up over the weekend, and we may actually see a bit more of a correction from Bitcoin. We're going to look at that and much more. We're going to go ahead and start with a crypto market overview. Before we do, I want to say thank you again for being an amazing part of my life. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment below. It's ridiculous how little amount of likes I get and how much positive comments I get. So please do that every single time. It may actually help grow the channel. All right, let's go ahead and start off with fear and greed index. First of all, it kind of spiked up from the 50s to the 60s. This kind of indicates that there was a pump over the weekend, and obviously it's based on that simple sentiment and the fact that people were FOMOing in. The concept here, though, is to sell the greed and to effectively buy the fear. So now that we see the greed index increasing, it doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't buy. It just means you be more careful and cautious, and you may consider securing some profits if you have some. You should have some profit, honestly, if you took any longs over the weekends or Thursday, Friday, when I kind of called out some of those good signals there. Taking a look here at Altcoin season index, we can see there are some pretty significant outliers here, but the key takeaway here is that getting under 30 is generally not a favorable sign. This basically implies that a lot more coins are underperforming versus Bitcoin, and that's not something we like to see. So a lot of profits are being taken, even though altcoin market cap is essentially above 1.5. That's generally a favorable sign. The overall sentiment here is, I wouldn't say bearish, it's just not bullish, okay? And so keep that in mind, even though altcoin season is still a very relevant and potential thing, especially with Ethereum doing extremely well. You want to be careful not to just take a, just take a long willy-nilly right now. That's why we're going to cover these coins, make sure we understand. These are the kind of the most requested coins outside of my top 5. So let's see here, what do we want to do first? Well, let's quickly recognize Bitcoin here, just to get a baseline, because if you're not trading Bitcoin, you don't know what you're doing in general for altcoins. Obviously, Bitcoin's overextended, hit its highest point here at 122.5. It's a close approximate, and its highest point, of course, ever. Bitcoin all-time high is very close to 123,300. So that's the all-time high. We came close to that range. You could argue this is a double top. The price is pulling back. No matter how you look at it, there's still a lot more liquidation above the price, and overall the sentiment here is still positive. Let's go ahead and pull this up here. I'll go ahead and pull up my Bitcoin playout chart and just recognize here we have a lot of liquidation, upwards about 124, 125,000 left. This is more macro liquidation, but majority of it has been fully swept. Okay, if we take a look at liquidation long delta, this is probably tapered off a little bit since a couple of hours ago, but we're in the 10 to 15 billion range, and there's a lot of open interest at 120. So that reinforces resistance and or support. So depending on if we close above or below that level, we'll determine a lot here moving forward. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this here. Now that we understand a bit more about Bitcoin, let's recognize a couple of important factors. First of all, Bitcoin does have a CME gap between 117,400 upwards of 119.1. So that is kind of a gap there available, as well as CME gap for Ethereum 4073 to 4185. Now moving on to the coins we're going to look at here today, you can kind of see here kind of with a side-by-side comparison which coins are doing better or worse than the others. Now let's make it a little easier to see and to clarify, Chainlink and Litecoin are the two that I have the most I would say, I think they're probably going to be the better performing coins here. I have my eyes on them versus the other AVAX and Hype, right? Now, not to say the other ones aren't good, just from a bird's eye view right now, though, we can see we're establishing higher highs and higher lows with these two coins, Link and Litecoin, and they're comparatively much better. And what I mean by that is if you see this recent pull off here, we can see the last 12 hours have been red. Majority of these other coins here, Chainlink and Litecoin specifically, have kind of plateaued in this range. They're retesting their highs here locally, and there's a good chance we continue higher up. So just know, bird's eye view, that's kind of what we're looking at there. We also have a Power of 3 expansion wave here right now for Bitcoin, where we had our accumulation phase. The price worked into its range. We had a manipulation phase trapping a lot of late shorts there in the 114s to 115s, and now a strong candle to rip their faces off. All right, so easy way to understand it is we're probably more likely to go higher based on that sentiment alone. Now, we don't trade based on one thing, but that is something that's important to note. Okay, so let's move on to Chainlink here and kind of see what's going on. Let's go ahead and start with the back-end data first and kind of go from there. And Chainlink has a lot of open interest below the price right now. So we've got heavy concentrations at 20.5 and roughly 19.2. So those would be good dollar cost average targets or considerations for longs if the price pulls back, based on the simple fact that there's a lot of interest there and volume. 20.5 makes sense, or 20.2, the local high in that range. would be a solid consideration for a long on Link based on the simple fact that it's outperforming Bitcoin currently. If Bitcoin pulls back to fill its CME gap at 117, we could very well see that $20 to $19 range retested. And if so, a long there seems sensible. There's a lot of liquidation here to the upside, basically implying more longs and shorts. Obviously, this coin is super strong. And we've also got a lot of liquidation between 21 and 20. So there's a decent chance we do see a leg down to $20. Just to put it out there. But there's equally as much of a chance to see 23 next as well. So it really depends on what kind of trader you are. For the most part, we're in a bullish type of rectangle pattern here, and that's important to recognize. So just to kind of give you some perspective here, and once again, you don't trade patterns alone, right, folks? But this is a pretty solid little continuation pattern. They typically break to the upside, okay? So hypothetically, along on the, once again, $21 to $20 range could be a good consideration if we have a manipulative little sweep to that lower side, sweep of liquidation, where the price action does one of these and then comes right back up. We're seeing the same thing from Bitcoin, or had seen that recently. So let's take a look at the daily really quick, just to get some perspective on this coin as well. From a macro time frame, obviously we're close to our highs there for earlier in late last year, earlier this year. And then obviously if we take a look here, we kind of zoom in, we can recognize we're over all moving averages. We're over 70 in the RSI. It's starting to taper off now. This is a good take profit consideration now. So keep in mind, from a conservative perspective, you should consider securing profits, because we are at an 8 on TD sequential. We're overextended, and we also have a fair value gap down as low as $20. So it seems more sensible to wait, just from a cautious perspective, to wait for the previous high of $20 to be retested as a new low, therefore filling that fair value gap as well. Okay, and a fair value gap just is created when the price moves up too quick and essentially creates a gap, and a lot of profits are left to be taken. So overall though, we got some good momentous indications, but some early signs here of reversal. 4-hour time frame also reflects here that we are bullish. We're over all moving averages. Everything here looks pretty strong. There's no real reason to want to consider against this coin or consider trading against it. You do want to recognize we are diverging on the MACD, but unless the volume picks up, that doesn't really matter too much. Okay, a lot of folks will short into divergences and have a lot of trouble with it, especially in bullish trends. So this is a bullish trend to the upside overall, even though we're seeing slight pullback here today. Nothing to be overly concerned with. So me personally, I think 19 to 20 seems like a very realistic consideration for entry, or more importantly, 20 to 21. Let me rephrase that. 20, the previous all-time high, or sorry, previous high rather, along with that fair value gap. I got my mind, or my eyes set on $20. So I'll just go ahead and create an alert here. Once, if and when the price surpasses that level, I may consider a long. But between now and then, I'll be patient and wait. But that's just kind of the concept. Now, obviously, if Bitcoin continues to maintain its range, I think Link will leg up. So please understand, it may not come down to $20, all right? So if you want to average in, it wouldn't be the worst consideration ever. That being said, let's take a look here at the daily time frame. Sorry, the back-end data first for Litecoin, and then we'll move on to our daily time frame. Litecoin's always been a coin that I've loved trading. If you look at our premium signals here, we took some really good profits for Bitcoin, Doge, Ethereum, Crow. Litecoin was one of those. I promise you, we had a pretty solid consideration for a long with Litecoin at some point. I'll have to search through there and find it for you. I apologize. Don't have that handy, but I take it from me, this coin is a coin you're much more better off taking longs than shorts in this coin. There's one point where I did try to short this coin in like the upper 90s, and we had to close out early because it just didn't work out. We've since had a good couple of nice solid longs. All that being said though, 109 is a heavy concentration, and 122 are two areas of open interest. But as you can see, 110 to 120 is littered with entries. So people are just buying the hell out of this coin between that range of 110 to 120. So those are good areas of consideration for dollar cost average. When we look at the liquidation delta, it's still pretty much above par there. Let's go ahead and refresh and make sure we're still looking here. We're still in the green. So that means there's more longs than shorts currently in this coin, and that's generally a favorable sign. And obviously, if we do a comparison with this in Bitcoin, we can see Litecoin is also very, very strong in the overall sense. While it could still pull back, the likelihood of it pulling back super hard is pretty low based on the overall sense. We'd have to see Bitcoin run towards 117K fast in order for that to happen. Either way, we take a look here in the last 7 days, liquidation left between 120 and 134, otherwise below between 118 and 110. Once more, folks, all this is available on our Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. Feel free to check that out. It's all available there for you if you decide you want to use that. Okay, so take a look here at the daily time frame for Litecoin. We do have a slight fair value gap as low as 112. I would say once more, that's probably a worst case scenario for us. We're right here testing 70 in the RSI. The key takeaway here is that money flow index is above the RSI. Typically when you see that, the price goes much higher. We saw the same thing back here where the money flow index was increasing and the RSI was just breaking above 70, and it continued much higher from 96 to 120. That's roughly where we took our last long, if I recall correctly. So let's take a look here at the 4-hour time frame, recognized too as well. We're over all moving averages. 4-hour time frame looks pretty solid. There's no reason to consider shorting against this coin. I know it seems crazy. It's like one of the only overextended coins in the market right now, but the truth is it's got all positive contributing factors here from a technical standpoint. Okay, so there's really very little you could argue here that would cause this coin to continue lower. Obviously, Bitcoin, starts to rally to the downside. If we see a lot of selling pressure, this coin will sell off. It's an altcoin no matter how you look at it. But it's a much better looking altcoin. You're going to statistically find more favorability considering a long versus a short. I would just recommend averaging in on the way down if the price, as the price continues lower, if it were to. So that's kind of my thoughts there. Let's take a look here next at AVAX and just quickly double check. This is a highly questionable coin, or sorry, a coin that I get tons of questions on, rather, but its performance has been questionable too. We look here, we got about 2430 and 2550 are the two areas of resistance. So those are points of control, basically strong areas of slowing pressure or exit liquidity. We see here as well, liquidation long delta is still in the green. This is not super substantial though. This coin can get upwards of 500 to 800 million, and it's only at about 100 right now. So it's not like a ton of buying pressure. Furthermore, we got liquidation down as low as 22 to 23, that little range there, and obviously 25 to roughly 26 above. So we're kind of smack dab in the middle of a range. When we look at the larger time frame here, we kind of zoom out. While this is still a 4-hour time frame, you can recognize here that we got a lot of volume at 25, and then secondary to that, just below maybe about the $23 range. The key takeaway here is we got some support here from previous at about the low 23 range, where we saw the price action respond as a support and resistance multiple times. So hypothetically, along in the low 23s makes sense. It's kind of close to where the price action is at right now, pending Bitcoin doesn't continue to run to the downside. So what we want to do is pay attention to Bitcoin dominance and just kind of see here, if this continues to taper off and come lower, drop below that 60 percentile, then I think AVAX should be able to rally back here. All that said, let's take a look here at, we already looked at the backend data. Let's just double check the daily here and kind of recognize a couple of important things. First of all, we are moderately overextended. Most coins are seeing a 7 or an 8 on TD sequential. Basically just means we've been running 8 days in a row with little continuation or retracement, okay? So hypothetically, the price could continue lower, but we've got all moving averages below the price, and we've got our RSI above 50. Those are quite favorable. I don't love the money flow index being low like it is, but that's only because we saw a pretty significant amount of selling pressure here. If that wasn't available there, then the 14-day consideration for the money flow index would be a little different. Okay, we can see here MACD FU tried to break out but didn't truly do so. So I think the truth here is that we got to see if $23 is going to hold. That's that key level support for us based on the transitionary time frame, and then kind of see where we're at from there. If Bitcoin can maintain 119 to 120 in the next 24 to 48 hours, I think AVAX will have another leg up. So this coin is looking better than I originally anticipated based on some other contributing factors, not just the back end and open interest, but more importantly, the 4-hour time frame. Just be mindful, a lot of resistance between 24 and 25. So if you do take it long, it may take a little while for that to progress past that level based on there just being a lot of volume. Taking a look here at Hype, let's see what's going on with Hyperliquid and double check the back end here for this guy. Quickly to note, when it comes to open interest, we are right here in that heavy accumulation zone, 44 to 46, tons of open interest. That reinforces support. We've got 300 million liquidation long delta. That's actually decent size for this coin. And then the same thing here as well. If we look at the last 7 days, most liquidation has been fully swept, so there's a bit left, chum in the water, so to speak, to the downside for the whales to essentially take profit. So 41 is that lower range of liquidation. So we may see 41 based on that sentiment. But if we look at the daily time frame, we kind of recognize here we're hanging out right at this 0.618 fib level. We're moderately overextended. The price does pull back. We got the moving averages hanging out at roughly the $41 range. So $41.50, $41 here in liquidation. If you kind of compare those two, that would seem like a very sensible place to either A, take a long, or B, just consider waiting for hypothetically shorting to that level. I like to say pump the brakes on taking shorts, but on the same accord right now, a lot of altcoins are kind of belly flopping to the downside, so it's not like the most optimal situation. All that said, though, if we take a look here on the daily time frame, we want to recognize too that we have some slight divergences here with the money flow index being below the RSI and stochastic trying to swing down, even though MACD converged. It'd probably be best or more advantageous to consider a long in the 41 to 42 range versus trying to force a trade right now. If you do end up taking a short, just keep in mind we got a lot of support below us, but also a fair value gap at the 41 range. So we've seen a lot of confluence, like a lot of important things are averaging themselves out in the low to mid 40s, or sorry, the low to mid 41s. So I think 41 seems like a much more sensible place to consider a trade if you are the patient type of trader like I am. Okay. Now, I personally love waiting for opportunities that may never happen versus forcing a trade. So it really just depends on what kind of trader you are, but you could find some benefit shorting right now. Just note there's a massive point of control here ever since we've been in this range since July 11th, basically exactly 1 month ago. We've maintained the most amount of volume at $43 to $44. So solid amount of support in the current range. I think a long makes a lot more sense than a short. But those are just my personal thoughts. I like to average it to my position. I don't take super massively large positions. It's just me personally. I've traded for quite a long time, and it's a good enough income for me to not have to go too crazy and try to make $1 million off every trade, right? Anyways, different strokes for different folks. I hope that makes sense. I described it all correctly. Make sure you check this out too, because you can trade all these awesome coins on BitUnix. They have a first-time trading reward bonus as well as a deposit reward bonus for our existing members. They have monthly continuation benefits on every single trader that trades underneath. So in other words, as soon as you use my link to register, you'll always be eligible for those future rewards. So check them out. They are phenomenal. Join us on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord, and whatever medium works best for you. And I appreciate you. Thanks again for being an awesome part of my life. I love you. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.